During the second Intifada, Israel was hit by a wave of suicide bombings. Palestinian militants with high-powered explosives strapped to their bodies. Time and time again, they crossed into Israel from the West Bank and Gaza, killing more than 1,000 Israeli civilians over 5 years. Part of Israel's response was the construction of a security barrier along the West Bank. And then came a high-tech security fence around Gaza, dramatically reducing the number of suicide bombers. And true to Newton's third law that for every action there is an opposite reaction, in 2007 the militant group Hamas took power in Gaza and focused on not just building rockets but improving their range and reliability. The first Qassam rocket was fired by Hamas in 2001. At the time it was more like a glorified fireworks with a range of less than 2 miles. But 6 years later came the Qassam 2, range 4.5 miles. The Qassam 3 a few years after that, range just over 6 miles. And the Qassam 4, almost 10 miles range. Keep in mind, Israel is a tiny country. Gaza to Tel Aviv, 40 miles. Gaza to Jerusalem, 60 miles. In March this year, the Israeli military said a house in Tel Aviv, which was hit by a Palestinian missile, had a range of 75 miles. And on Tuesday, a Palestinian-made missile fired from Gaza reportedly landed north of Tel Aviv. And Palestinians have made these slow but steady improvements to their arsenal of rockets and missiles, despite Gaza being under an Israeli blockade or but sealed off from the rest of the world. Ian Williams is the Deputy Director of the Missile Defense Project at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. It's a Washington-based think tank, and he is joining us now. So, Ian, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so how has Hamas and the other militant groups in Gaza, like Islamic Jihad, been able to make this slow, steady improvement? There has to be a certain level of skill involved here as well. It's not easy to build a missile, even one as basic as these, right?
Right. I mean, there is a lot of skill, a lot of determination for sure. But I don't think you can count the fact that they have been getting a lot of support from outside actors, particularly Iran. Despite the blockade, despite Gaza being very isolated, they are still able to get a lot of some of the more complex manufactured components to these weapons that are built in Iran, smuggled in piece by piece, and then assembled in Gaza. And we see this, Iran doing this not just in Gaza, but in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in Yemen, for example, with the Houthi forces there. So they've become very good at getting this stuff through the net.
And the missiles that we're talking about here, these homemade ones, if you like, as opposed to, maybe the Grad or the Katyusha rockets which are smuggled in. The Hamas homemade ones are pretty basic. They're unguided. At times they're unreliable. In terms of armed conflict, are they more effective as a weapon of terror as opposed to a weapon of war, fear versus body count?
Right. I mean, they're not going to be effective military weapons, right, which require you to have some level of accuracy to be able to hit the target you're going for. The kind of Qassam rockets, the unguided rockets, are really terror weapons. They're meant, in some cases, not even to. I think with the advent of Iron Dome, I don't think that there's much hope to even get a lot of these rockets through. It's just about getting the air raid sirens blaring and to get people kind of afraid in the shelters. One interesting statistic that I read recently from the 2014 Gaza conflict was that most of the injuries of Israeli citizens were not actually from the rockets, but from people falling on their way to the bomb to the bomb shelters. So,
yeah, it is interesting. There's also just simply the cost of these missiles, reportedly just a few $100s each to build, which again, it's a huge strategic advantage when you consider that every time one is shot down by the Iron Dome defense system, it costs Israel tens of thousands of dollars. And at times, the Palestinians have been able to overwhelm the Iron Dome just with sheer numbers of rockets.
Well, I mean, I think. I don't know if the Iron Dome has been actually overwhelmed by these rockets because they're so inaccurate. One of the strengths of the Iron Dome system is it's able to track these rockets as they're coming in and be able to discern which ones are actually going to hit a civilian area and which ones are just going to land somewhere in the desert. And they only engage those that are actually a threat, and that's only approximately about 20 to 25% of the rockets fired, they actually have to engage. And if you look at this current, the numbers of intercepts that Israel is claiming right now is about 50 or so rockets intercepted out of 200, which tracks very closely with the engagement rate of past conflicts, which kind of tells me that they're not making much improvement of their accuracy of the missiles.
Is there any clear idea of not just the number, but also the range of the rockets which have been stockpiled in Gaza? Because it seems there's plenty of short-range missiles which can go maybe between 6 miles and 10 miles. How many of those longer-range ones would they have which can reach Tel Aviv and beyond?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, those missiles are very much sourced, at least the component parts are sourced outside of Gaza. Probably smuggled in from Iran, maybe assembled in Gaza, but smuggled in by the Iranians. I found it interesting that they have actually been hit, firing some rockets as far as Tel Aviv in this particular conflict, the ongoing right now, which kind of says that they are actually bringing out some of their bigger, heavier stuff for this particular fight. Which could indicate that it's going to go on for a long time if they're serious. Oftentimes, you'll see a kind of a symbolic response to an Israeli strike where they'll fire back a handful of very short-range, kind of expendable rockets. But the fact that they're using some of their rarer assets, some of their bigger stuff, which they don't have as many, suggests that they are kind of escalating or trying to do as much damage as they can.
Yeah, certainly making a statement when those missiles, when those sirens are heard in Tel Aviv and those missiles are landing just north of the main city there. Ian, we are out of time, but thank you very much for being with us. We appreciate your analysis.
Thank you for having me.